Imagine this. You're in a relationship that's destroying you piece by piece. Your friends keep saying, just leave. But something invisible pulls you back every single time. It's like you're addicted to someone who hurts you. You've tried everything: therapy, self-help books, even blocking their number. But somehow, you always end up right back where you started. Knowledge builds empires, and today, you'll build yours. If you're looking for basic relationship advice, this is not for you. What I'm about to reveal is far more powerful. The underground psychology that keeps people trapped for decades in relationships that are literally killing them. These mind control tactics are highly manipulative. So if you're Mr. Nice Guy, this is not for you. Skip or watch at your own risk. Because once you understand these dark psychological forces, you'll never see relationships the same way again. The addiction trap, what they don't want you to know. Let me tell you something critical. What you're experiencing isn't love. It's a psychological phenomenon called trauma bonding, and it's designed to keep you trapped forever. The most dangerous thing about trauma bonds, they feel exactly like love. You'll defend them. You'll fight for them. You'll sacrifice everything for them. But they're actually a sophisticated form of psychological imprisonment that few people ever escape. Mind Trap 1. The biochemical prison. Ever wonder why drugs are so addictive? Your brain releases dopamine, creating pleasure and cravings. Here's what's insane. Toxic relationships hijack this same system. When your toxic partner gives you those rare moments of affection after days of cruelty, your brain releases a dopamine flood more powerful than cocaine. I'm not exaggerating. Harvard researchers discovered the brain scans are nearly identical. For example, when Sarah's boyfriend would ignore her for days, then suddenly shower her with affection, her brain literally became rewired to crave this cycle. She wasn't weak. Her neural pathways were chemically altered. What makes this trap so effective is that it works beneath your conscious awareness. You think you're making choices, but your brain chemistry is actually making them for you. Every time you return to your toxic partner, it's not love driving you. It's a biochemical addiction your rational mind can't override. Look at how this plays out in real life. You know they're bad for you. You know they'll hurt you again. You even tell your friends you're done. Then they text and your heart races. Your palms sweat. You feel an overwhelming urgency to respond. That's not romance. That's your brain demanding its drug. This biochemical prison is reinforced every time they are temporarily kind to you after a period of cruelty. The relief you feel creates a powerful neurochemical cocktail. Dopamine spikes, creating addiction. Oxytocin releases deepening attachment, and endorphins flooding your system, providing relief. This exact same chemical cascade happens in the brains of drug addicts when they finally get their fix after withdrawal. The longer you stay, the stronger these pathways become, and the harder it is to break free. Pro tip: next time you feel that desperate craving to return, recognize it as a withdrawal symptom, not love. Your brain is literally detoxing from a biochemical addiction. Write down exactly what you're feeling physically: racing heart, chest tightness, emotional desperation, and label it. This is withdrawal, not love. Mind Trap 2. The intermittent reinforcement technique. This is the most dangerous manipulation tactic ever discovered. while consistent rewards create moderate attachment. Unpredictable rewards create obsession. Casino companies make billions exploiting this psychological glitch. But toxic manipulators use it to control your mind for free. When someone treats you amazingly, 20% of the time and terribly 80%, your brain becomes obsessed with winning that 20% moment. You'll tolerate increasing amounts of abuse just to get that emotional high. Psychological research has revealed that this phenomenon, called intermittent reinforcement, creates the strongest behavioral bonds known to science. It's why gambling is more addictive than almost any other activity. The unpredictability of the reward makes it irresistible to your brain. Think of someone who texts you back immediately sometimes, then disappears for days. That unpredictability isn't accidental. It's strategic manipulation that creates addiction. I worked with a client named Jason, whose girlfriend would randomly switch between treating him like a king and treating him like garbage. There was no pattern he could predict. Some mornings he'd wake up to breakfast in bed, others to screaming accusations. After 3 years of this, he was completely psychologically dependent on her approval. When she'd finally give him a moment of kindness after days of cruelty, the relief was so intense that he became addicted to the cycle itself. The scary part? This works even when you know it's happening. Your logical brain can understand the manipulation while your emotional brain still falls for it every time. Here's how manipulators perfect this technique. They identify what you deeply crave: love, validation, security. They give it to you abundantly at first, the baiting phase. They gradually become inconsistent with the reward. They eventually make you work harder and harder for smaller rewards. They masterfully link moments of genuine connection with manipulation. Pro tip: track the pattern of good-bad treatment. Once you see the deliberate cycle, its power over you diminishes instantly. Create a simple calendar, marking days with different colors based on how they treated you. The random pattern will become visually obvious, helping your rational brain override your emotional responses. Mind Trap 3. The Identity Distortion Protocol. Oh, this one is seriously twisted. You know what's crazy? These manipulators don't just control your emotions. They literally reprogram your self-image. Through constant criticism and occasional praise, they install a false self-perception where you believe you're fundamentally flawed. No one else could possibly love you. You're lucky they tolerate you at all. It's like psychological malware that corrupts your mental operating system. I actually worked with a client whose abusive partner convinced her she was too emotional when she cried after he cheated. 2 years later, she was apologizing to him for her overreaction. That's how deep this programming goes. The identity distortion happens gradually, so subtly you barely notice it happening. First, they identify your deepest insecurities. Then they periodically trigger and soothe these insecurities to create emotional dependency. Eventually, they replace your self-image entirely with their twisted perception of you. Your own internal voice begins to sound like their voice. Your sense of reality bends to match theirs. Your boundaries dissolve until you can't tell where they end and you begin. This identity corruption is particularly devastating because it persists even after the relationship ends. Many survivors continue to hear their abuser's voice in their head for years, criticizing their choices and undermining their confidence. The most effective manipulators target your core identity markers. Your appearance. No one else would find you attractive. Your competence. You couldn't survive without me. Your lovability. You're lucky I put up with you. And your sanity. You're crazy, oversensitive, irrational. With each criticism, they chip away at your foundation until you're standing on nothing but their approval. Pro tip: write down who you were before this relationship. This creates a reference point your manipulator can't distort. Ask friends who knew you before to remind you of qualities they saw in you. These external validators can break through the programming when your own perception has been corrupted. Mind Trap 4. Trauma response exploitation. While others panic or freeze during conflict, manipulators move seamlessly to exploit your psychological weaknesses. When threatened, your brain triggers a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. Manipulators learn which one you default to, then deliberately trigger it to control you. If you freeze during confrontation, they'll create constant conflicts so you become paralyzed and unable to leave. If you fawn, people please, when attacked, they'll increase attacks so you're constantly trying to win back their approval. This exploitation works at a primal brain level beneath conscious awareness. Let me show you exactly how insidious this gets. Lisa's partner discovered early on that she would freeze during intense arguments. Her childhood trauma response. Once he recognized this pattern, he strategically started explosive arguments whenever she tried to address relationship problems or set boundaries. Her brain would shut down, she'd dissociate, and the issues would remain unresolved. He was literally weaponizing her trauma against her. Another client, Marcus, had a fawn response. He tried to please and appease when feeling threatened. His partner learned to exploit this by creating constant dissatisfaction. Nothing he did was ever good enough, which kept him in a perpetual state of trying to earn approval that never came. These trauma responses evolved as survival mechanisms, but in the hands of a manipulator, they become control levers that bypass your rational thinking. They learn which response you have and exploit it mercilessly. When you fight, they provoke you to react, then use your reaction to paint you as the abusive one. When you flee, they create instability, so you're constantly managing crises instead of leaving. When you freeze, they overwhelm you with conflict when you try to address issues. When you fawn, they withhold approval, so you're perpetually trying to please them. The most twisted part: many manipulators instinctively identify your trauma response within the first few interactions, long before you realize what's happening. Pro tip: identify your trauma response pattern. Just naming it breaks half its power immediately. Practice grounding techniques that pull you out of your automatic response. Deep breathing, naming 5 things you can see, or pressing your feet firmly into the ground can interrupt the trauma response long enough for your rational brain to regain control. Mind Trap 5. The manufactured reality technique. This next one actually keeps me up at night. It's called gaslighting. And it's like a dark art of making you question your own sanity. The manipulator denies your reality so consistently that you start doubting your own perception. They'll say, that never happened, or you're too sensitive, until you can't trust yourself anymore. Picture this. Your partner flirts with someone in front of you. When you mention it later, they say, "You're crazy, that never happened." Repeat this hundreds of times, and you'll eventually believe you're losing your mind. Gaslighting is the most psychologically devastating form of manipulation because it targets your fundamental ability to trust yourself. Once a manipulator destroys your confidence in your own perception, they can replace your reality with whatever serves them best. The term comes from a 1944 film where a husband manipulates his wife into believing she's insane by secretly dimming the gas lights in their home, then denying they've changed when she notices. Today, this technique has been refined into a psychological weapon that leaves no visible scars but causes profound damage. Gaslighting typically progresses through stages. They deny something happened that you clearly remember. They question your memory when you insist, "Are you sure? That doesn't sound like me." They minimize your concerns. You're overreacting as usual. They deflect by questioning your mental stability. Maybe you should see someone about these delusions. They recruit others to support their version of reality. Everyone agrees with me. When skillfully executed, gaslighting makes you dependent on the manipulator to define what's real. You begin checking with them before trusting your own experience. Did that really happen? Am I remembering correctly? Am I overreacting? This transferred reality testing gives them near complete control. I worked with a woman whose husband had convinced her she was forgetful and unstable. He would move her belongings, delete messages from her phone, and change plans they'd made, then insist she was misremembering everything. After years of this, she was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, while he presented himself as her supportive, long-suffering husband. It wasn't until she installed hidden cameras in their home that she discovered the elaborate reality manipulation he'd been conducting. Pro tip: keep a hidden journal of incidents. When they try to distort reality, you'll have concrete evidence they're lying. Date each entry and be specific about exactly what happened. This creates an objective record that can't be manipulated and serves as an anchor for your reality when you start doubting yourself. The escape system: breaking free from mind control. Because you've watched this far, you're among the few who truly understand what's happening. Let me reward you with the most powerful escape techniques that most therapists don't even know about. The reason conventional advice fails is that it treats trauma bonding like a normal relationship problem. It's not. It's more like deprogramming someone from a cult or breaking a chemical addiction. Standard approaches don't work because they don't address the neurobiological and psychological hooks that keep you trapped. Dark freedom tactic. 1. The neurochemical reset. Your brain is chemically addicted, so willpower alone fails. You need a biochemical intervention, the 72-hour dopamine fast. For 3 days, eliminate all contact. Every text extends your addiction by resetting the withdrawal clock. This method accelerates the detox process by 340% according to addiction research. For example, Michael tried to leave his abusive partner 14 times. On the 15th attempt, he used this technique and finally broke free permanently. Here's what happens in your brain during the 72-hour reset. Hours 0 to 24, peak withdrawal symptoms, anxiety, obsessive thoughts, physical discomfort. Hours, 24 to 48. Neurochemical fluctuations begin to stabilize. Hours, 48 to 72. Brain begins forming new neural pathways. Most people sabotage themselves in the first 24 hours because the withdrawal symptoms feel unbearable. They send a text just to check in and instantly reset their brain chemistry back to day 0 of the addiction. To successfully implement this reset, block them everywhere: phone, email, social media. Tell trusted friends you're doing a 72-hour detox and need accountability. Prepare distraction activities for when cravings hit. Write a letter to yourself about why you're leaving. Read it when tempted to contact them. Remove or hide objects that trigger memories of them. This neurochemical reset creates the first crack in the addiction cycle. It won't completely break the bond, but it creates the mental space necessary for the next techniques to work. Pro tip: prepare for withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, insomnia, and obsessive thoughts. They're signs the addiction is breaking, not that you should go back. Keep a detailed log of your physical and emotional symptoms during the 72 hours. Watching them peak and then gradually subside provides visible proof that you're healing. Dark freedom tactic 2: the psychological firewall. While others struggle with boundaries that get violated, you'll install a complete psychological firewall. The Reverse Manipulation Awareness Protocol. Document every manipulation tactic they've used. When the urge to return hits, review the list. This creates an automatic cognitive interruption that stops romanticization. This isn't just theory. I've watched people go from helpless to empowered within days using this method. The protocol works by activating your analytical brain, prefrontal cortex, which can override the emotional brain limbic system that drives the addiction. By cataloging the manipulation tactics, you create distance between yourself and the emotional experience, allowing you to see the relationship objectively. Here's how to create your psychological firewall. List every manipulative incident you can remember. Be specific. Label each incident with the specific tactic used: gaslighting, silent treatment, etc. Note how each incident made you feel emotionally and physically. Identify the reward that followed the manipulative episode. Recognize the pattern of manipulation: pain, reward, relief. For example, accused me of flirting with the waiter, stormed out of the restaurant, left me to pay, and find my way home. That's the incident. The tactic was creating artificial crisis and abandonment trigger. Your response was anxiety, chest tightness, panic, desperate need to fix things. The reward came as a text the next morning, saying, "I forgive you," followed by flowers. The pattern was accusation, abandonment, reconciliation, relief. When you document 20+ incidents, the pattern becomes undeniable. Your rational brain can finally override your emotional attachment when you see the deliberate nature of the manipulation. Pro tip: add the date beside each manipulation incident. Seeing the pattern over time creates instant emotional detachment. Pay special attention to how the tactics escalated over time. This reveals the progressive nature of abuse and helps counter the "it wasn't that bad" thoughts that pull you back. Dark freedom tactic 3. The identity reclamation system. Rebuilding your identity is non-negotiable. You've been psychologically colonized, and you need to reclaim your territory. The 20-minute identity revival technique Each day, spend 20 minutes doing something that was important to you before this relationship. This reactivates neural pathways that existed before the manipulation began. Watch how quickly your true self resurfaces when you consistently practice this. Identity erosion is one of the most devastating effects of trauma bonding. You literally forget who you are outside of the relationship. Your preferences, opinions, and even personality become shaped by the manipulator. Reclaiming your identity requires deliberate reprogramming. The 20-minute technique works because neural pathways are strengthened through use and weakened through neglect. By deliberately engaging in activities that were meaningful to your pre-relationship self, you're literally rebuilding neural connections that the manipulator worked to destroy. Follow this structured approach. Make a list of activities you enjoyed before the relationship. Identify things you were good at or proud of pre-relationship. Find old photos of yourself looking happy before meeting them. Connect with friends who knew you before. Daily practice. 20 minutes of pre-relationship activities. The key is consistency. 20 minutes daily is more effective than 3 hours once a week because it steadily reinforces the neural pathways of your authentic self. A client named Rebecca used this technique by playing the piano daily, something she'd loved but abandoned when her controlling partner criticized her playing. The first few days felt mechanical and empty. By day 14, she found herself losing track of time, fully immersed in the music. That moment of flow was her first experience of her authentic self in over 2 years. Pro tip: focus on activities that made you feel powerful or joyful before the relationship. These emotions directly counteract the biochemical addiction. Keep a daily log of how these activities make you feel. You'll notice a progression from going through the motions to genuine enjoyment as your authentic self re-emerges. Dark freedom tactic. 4. The cognitive deprogramming protocol. Manipulators install false beliefs in your mind that keep you trapped. These toxic thoughts become your prison guards, monitoring your every move and preventing escape. Common installed beliefs include: no one else will ever love me. I'm too damaged now for a healthy relationship. Maybe it's not that bad and I'm overreacting. If I just try harder, things will change. The problems are mostly my fault. They need me. They'll fall apart without me. These thoughts aren't random. They're deliberately planted to ensure you stay. They work by creating fear, obligation, guilt, and self-doubt. The cognitive deprogramming protocol systematically identifies and replaces these toxic thoughts. For 1 week, write down every negative thought about yourself or rationalization for your partner's behavior. Be vigilant. These thoughts often feel like your own voice. For each thought, ask, is this really my belief, or was it planted by my manipulator? Identify specific incidents when they express this idea. Challenge each belief with evidence. If you think, no one else will love me, list people who have loved you in the past or present. Create counter-statements to each toxic belief. Repeat these multiple times daily, especially when the negative thought arises. This protocol is based on cognitive deprogramming techniques used with cult survivors. It systematically dismantles the psychological infrastructure that keeps you bound to the manipulator. Lauren, a former client, discovered through thought logging that her fear of being too difficult was directly planted by her ex, who labeled her high maintenance whenever she expressed a need. By tracing this belief to its source and creating the replacement thought, having needs is human, not difficult. She gradually freed herself from the self-censoring that had defined her relationship. Pro tip: record yourself reading your replacement statements in a confident voice. Listen to this recording daily, especially upon waking and before sleep, when your subconscious is most receptive. This accelerates the reprogramming process significantly. Dark Freedom Tactic 5: the support system reconstruction. Manipulators systematically isolate you from friends and family, cutting off your escape routes and ensuring they become your primary influence. This isolation isn't accidental, it's strategic. By separating you from your support network, they eliminate competing perspectives that might challenge their reality, prevent others from noticing and pointing out the abuse, make you entirely dependent on them for emotional connection, and remove potential allies who could help you escape. The support system reconstruction technique rapidly rebuilds social connections that can break the manipulator's monopoly on influence. Unlike conventional advice to reach out to friends, this approach acknowledges the shame and fear that makes reconnection difficult. Instead, it provides a structured method to rebuild support. Begin with low-pressure outreach to 1 to 2 trusted individuals who knew you before the relationship. A simple, just thinking of you message opens the door without pressure. Share a small truth about your situation with these trusted allies. Example: things with partner aren't what they seem. I'm struggling, but not ready to talk fully about it yet. Ask one trusted person to be your reality check partner. Their role is not to tell you what to do, but to reflect back when your thinking seems distorted. Gradually expand your circle to include personal friends, family members, support groups, online or in person, and professional help, therapist, counselor. When deeply connected to multiple people, you create a psychological buffer against the manipulator's influence. Research shows that social support is the single strongest predictor of successfully leaving abusive relationships. The right supporters don't push you to leave before you're ready. They simply hold space for your authentic self until you're strong enough to reclaim it. Pro tip: create different levels of support for different needs. Some people are good listeners, others provide practical help. Others offer distraction. Map out who serves which function in your new support system and draw on each appropriately, rather than expecting any one person to meet all needs. The final power play. The most dangerous people are not those who show their power openly, but those who hide it behind a mask of love. They're counting on your silence, your confusion, and your self-doubt to keep you trapped. But now you know their playbook. You understand the invisible forces that have been controlling you. This knowledge gives you power they never wanted you to have. Because you've stayed to the end, I'll share one final technique that's almost unfairly effective: the replacement strategy. Your brain craves the dopamine from their intermittent reinforcement. Replace it with a healthy dopamine source: exercise, achievement, or new social connections. This reduces withdrawal symptoms by up to 60%. The replacement strategy works because it addresses the neurochemical void that leaving creates. When you remove the toxic source of dopamine, The manipulator. Your brain screams for a replacement. If you don't provide one intentionally, you'll likely return to the familiar source or find another toxic replacement. Here's how to implement this strategy effectively. Physical activity. Exercise produces endorphins and dopamine naturally. A 30-minute daily workout creates a biochemical state similar to what you felt during the good times with your manipulator, but without the devastating cost. Achievement triggers. Set small, achievable daily goals. Each accomplishment triggers dopamine release. Start tiny. Even organizing a drawer counts, and gradually increase the challenge. Healthy social connection. Safe relationships produce oxytocin, the bonding hormone your brain associates with attachment. Regular connection with supportive people helps satisfy the craving for emotional bonding. Creative expression. Artistic activities engage the brain's reward centers. Writing, music, art, or any creative outlet provides healthy stimulation for the same neural pathways. Mindfulness practices. Meditation and breathwork regulate the nervous system, reducing the panic-like withdrawal symptoms that drive many back to manipulators. The key is consistency. You must engage in these replacement activities daily, especially in the critical first 90 days after leaving. Your neurochemistry is literally rewiring, and these healthy inputs accelerate the healing process. But be warned, once you start down this path of psychological freedom, there's no going back. You'll see manipulation everywhere, not just in your relationship. Knowledge like this comes with a price. You'll need to ask yourself how far you're willing to go to reclaim your mind. The dark truth about recovery. Here's something most experts won't tell you. Healing isn't linear. You'll have days of incredible clarity followed by crushing moments of doubt. This isn't failure. It's the normal detox process as your brain chemistry stabilizes. The statistical reality is sobering. On average, people attempt to leave manipulative relationships 7 times before succeeding permanently. This isn't because they're weak. It's because trauma bonding creates an addiction more powerful than heroin. Understanding this should bring relief, not shame. If you've returned multiple times, you're experiencing the predictable neurochemical pull of addiction, not personal failure. Recovery follows a pattern similar to other addictions. The withdrawal phase, days 114. Intense cravings, anxiety, insomnia, obsessive thoughts. The clarity window, weeks 2 to 4. Periods of lucidity, where you see the manipulation clearly. The wrist zone, months 1 to 3. Dangerous period when nostalgia and selective memory intensify. The integration phase, months 3-12. Gradually processing the experience and rebuilding. The wisdom stage, year 1+. Transforming experience into insight that protects you permanently. Each time you leave and return, you restart this cycle, but you're not back at zero. Each attempt teaches you something valuable that strengthens your next effort. The critical benchmark is 90 days. Research shows that after 3 months of no contact, the biochemical addiction substantially weakens. If you can maintain separation for this period, your chances of permanent freedom increase dramatically. Why this matters now more than ever? In today's hyper-connected world, manipulation has become both more sophisticated and more accessible. Social media, dating apps, and instant communication create perfect environments for trauma bonding to flourish. Digital platforms enable 24/7 access for manipulation, easier love bombing through constant contact, more effective intermittent reinforcement, seen unseen messages, appearing disappearing online, greater isolation from support networks, and continuous surveillance of your activities. These factors have created a perfect storm where trauma bonds form faster and become more intense than ever before. Understanding the psychology behind these bonds isn't just helpful, it's essential for navigating modern relationships safely. If you're ready for more dark psychology tactics that actually work, hit subscribe and the notification bell. Most people will watch this video, feel momentarily enlightened, then do nothing. But you're not most people, are you? Try these techniques and see how quickly you can turn your psychological prison into a launch pad for freedom. Your manipulator has no idea what's coming. Remember, what seems like love might actually be your brain's addiction to psychological warfare. Choose freedom. Choose power. Choose yourself.